Do you believe in second chances? In a journey of love and self-discovery, Angelina and Jonathan show us that even after a painful separation, true love can be reborn, stronger and more resilient. Get ready for a heartfelt story of forgiveness, reconnection, and hope. Click now and let yourself be inspired by this journey of transformation and learning. A story that will touch your heart and maybe even change the way you see love. Don't miss it. Angelina remembered a special night under the vibrant lights of New York City when she and Jonathan decided to take a small detour from their routine. It was a time when everything felt simpler. They walked through Central Park hand in hand, talking about dreams that made them laugh and sigh at the same time. The sky was clear, and the city lights cast a soft glow on his face, which, at that moment, was all she could see. He made her feel that, by his side, anything was possible. Jonathan, with his practical and straightforward demeanor, was the type of man who knew what he wanted. He worked hard to build a solid career as an attorney at a major firm, and each achievement felt like a decisive step toward the future. Meanwhile, Angelina lived amidst her artistic passions. As a photographer, she saw beauty and meaning in every detail of urban life, capturing moments that, to many, might go unnoticed. Despite their different personalities, the contrast between them seemed to work, creating a harmony that allowed their love to blossom. Jonathan offered the security and sense of reality that balanced Angelina's more sensitive and dreamy outlook. And she, in turn, showed him a world beyond deadlines and contracts, a life where there was space for art and contemplation. However, as the months went by, routine started taking its toll. The demands of Jonathan's work grew increasingly intense, pulling him away from the lightheartedness with which he once approached their relationship. At the same time, Angelina found herself more and more immersed in personal projects that fed her soul but also required much of her time and dedication. Moments together became rare, and when they did happen, they carried a tension that slowly drained the initial magic. Even so, Angelina held onto a glimmer of hope that it was just a difficult phase, something they would overcome together. She tried to see beyond the occasional arguments and the frustration that arose when he had to take yet another urgent call in the middle of a dinner. And Jonathan, despite his constant rush, still looked at her with the same affection as before, though often masked by the exhaustion he brought home from work. One night, however, everything began to change. As Angelina watched Jonathan's tired face, she realized that the distance between them was growing faster than she had imagined. The smile that used to come so easily now felt forced, an attempt to hide the doubts they both felt. It was a hard feeling to accept, but it was inevitable. The love was still there, but now it was tinged with a shadow of uncertainty. Angelina wondered if it would be possible to change the course of their journey. She wanted to believe it was. The tension between Angelina and Jonathan, initially subtle, began to intensify over time, transforming into an uncomfortable presence that seemed to follow them at every encounter. One night, after yet another long day at the office, Jonathan arrived home exhausted, shoulders slumped and expression weary. He left his suit jacket on the couch and sank into the nearest chair as Angelina prepared a simple dinner. It was a Friday night, and she had hoped they could finally spend an evening together without interruptions. As they started to eat, Angelina, in a hopeful and lighthearted tone, suggested a trip they had long wanted to take. It was an idea that brought her excitement and reminded her of the carefree days at the beginning of their relationship. But Jonathan reacted unexpectedly. His gaze dropped to his plate, and he sighed, as if it were too trivial a matter to discuss. "Now's not the best time, Angelina. The firm is at a critical point, and I simply can't be away right now. You understand, right?" Her smile quickly faded. It was an answer she had heard countless times, and the frustration grew with every repetition. She fought to keep her patience, but at that moment, something changed. "Jonathan, there's always a reason to delay, to prioritize work. I'm starting to think you'll never see the right moment for us," she said, her voice trembling but firm. He frowned, irritated by the implicit accusation. "Angelina, it's easy for you to say that. Your work is flexible. You can take time off whenever you want. But I'm building something important, and I need to be present," he replied defensively. The exchange of harsh words escalated, each of them carrying their own reasons and accumulated hurts. Jonathan couldn't understand Angelina's need to live every moment intensely, and she, in turn, felt increasingly distant from him, as if he were physically present but emotionally unreachable. With each new sentence, it was as if an invisible brick was being placed between them, creating a barrier that became impossible to ignore. Days passed after that argument, but the tension remained, now accompanied by an uncomfortable silence. They avoided seeing each other at the usual times, and when they did, conversations were short, almost trivial, as if they feared touching on their true feelings. Angelina threw herself into her photography projects, searching for some form of solace and distraction. Jonathan, on the other hand, dove even deeper into his work, as if trying to justify the distance by showing that his dedication was, after all, to ensure a stable future for them both. One night, Angelina decided to go out and photograph the city. She needed air, a perspective that would help her understand what was really happening between them. Walking through the illuminated streets, she thought about how, despite everything, the love was still there. There was no doubt that she and Jonathan still cared about each other, but the question she couldn't answer was whether that would be enough to overcome the barriers they had built. Back at the apartment, she sat alone in the dark, looking at an old photo of them taken on a sunny day in Central Park. Jonathan arrived shortly after, and seeing her holding the photo, he paused. There was something in her eyes that made him hesitate. He knew he needed to say something, but the words escaped him. "Jonathan, are we still fighting for the same thing?" Her question was simple but carried a depth he wasn't yet prepared to face. He felt a weight on his chest as he realized that, although he still loved her, he might not be willing to make the changes she so desperately desired. Finally, on a quiet Sunday morning, they both came to a decision. Sitting across from each other, without the accusations or excuses they used to employ, they accepted that the distance between them was unsustainable. Angelina spoke first, acknowledging that, although there was still love, they couldn't see a future where they could stay together without hurting each other. Jonathan nodded, his hands trembling slightly, feeling the weight of the imminent goodbye. Without dramatic tears, without final shouts or accusations, they decided it was best to separate, at least for now. A silence settled between them, but it was no longer that uncomfortable silence. It was a kind of melancholic peace, the end of one phase and the beginning of another. And with one last silent embrace, Angelina and Jonathan said goodbye, each carrying memories of a love that, for now, needed to be left behind. After the separation, Angelina found herself in a new, unfamiliar space of freedom and solitude. The first days were hard, with a silence that weighed on the apartment she once shared with Jonathan. Small details, like the absence of his cologne and the empty side of the bed, seemed to remind her of everything she had lost. However, as time passed, something inside her began to change. The pain slowly gave way to an internal curiosity, a need to discover who she was outside of that relationship. Angelina decided to occupy her time and mind by diving even deeper into her career as a photographer. Projects she once postponed out of lack of time or hesitation now became endeavors where she invested all her energy. She devoted herself to capturing the stories of strangers on the city streets, seeking beauty in the faces and urban landscapes. This practice offered her a new perspective and helped her see the subtleties of human emotions, something she now understood better than ever. One afternoon, while working on a series of photos about simple moments of daily life, Angelina felt an unexpected peace. With the camera in her hands, she ventured into places she used to avoid as a way to confront herself. During one of her wanderings, she found a small cafe that caught her attention. She walked in, ordered a coffee, and sat by the window to observe people passing by. It was her favorite routine, and in that quiet, she began to realize that there were parts of herself just waiting for a chance to resurface. Across the city, Jonathan was also trying to cope with the consequences of the breakup. At first, he threw himself into his work, convinced that the more he dedicated himself to his career, the less he would feel Angelina's absence. He volunteered for extra cases, accepting overtime and even projects he would previously turn down. But eventually, he realized that not even the most exhausting work could fill the void she left. It was during a particularly lonely night that Jonathan began to question his choices. While looking through some old photos on his phone, he stopped at a picture of Angelina laughing, captured in a spontaneous moment. That genuine smile, one he barely remembered taking a photo of, made him realize just how much she had been a source of light in his life. He thought of all the times he had put her second, believing there would always be time to make it right later. The sense of loss hit him unexpectedly, and Jonathan realized he needed to find more balance. With encouragement from a close friend, he started going to the gym regularly, returning to physical activities he had abandoned due to work overload. At the same time, he began dedicating some weekends to visiting family, something he always put off. These small changes helped him see that life wasn't all about work, and he might have neglected essential things, like his own well-being. As time passed, both Angelina and Jonathan began rediscovering versions of themselves that had been left behind during the relationship. For Angelina, this meant embracing her creative freedom, taking risks on new projects, and exploring parts of her art that always inspired her. One of her new projects, inspired by her own emotional journey, was a photo series called Invisible Scars. The series captured people with striking stories, each displaying a physical or emotional scar that told their personal tale of resilience. Jonathan, on the other hand, found value in simplifying his life. He realized that while he loved his career, he needed to set boundaries. He began to turn down some cases, preferring to have more time for himself and for those around him. An old hobby, reading, became part of his routine again. He found himself immersed in books on self-development, philosophy, and even romance, something he'd never imagined would interest him but now seemed to offer the comfort and perspective he so needed. Without knowing, they each embarked on distinct paths of self-discovery that, though separate, shared one commonality: they were learning to value what truly mattered. Angelina, during a photo shoot that took her outside the city, felt a satisfaction she hadn't experienced in a long time. Jonathan, on the other hand, found peace in simple moments, like an afternoon reading or a walk in the park. It wasn't that the love they felt for each other had disappeared, it was simply that, in the silence of their individual journeys, they were discovering that self-love and balance were essential to any relationship. Gradually, Angelina and Jonathan rose again, each in their own way, becoming more complete individuals, even though the process was painful. They still thought of each other in unexpected moments, like a song playing in a cafe or a sunset seen through a window. But now, they both knew that to move forward, or perhaps to have a second chance together one day, they first needed to reconcile with their own souls. The reunion between Angelina and Jonathan happened by chance, at an event in the art gallery where she was exhibiting her new photo series. After months of dedicating herself to the Invisible Scars project, her exhibit had attracted a considerable audience, drawing interest from critics and art enthusiasts alike. The gallery was packed with people driven by curiosity and empathy, ready to explore the stories behind the images. Jonathan had no idea the exhibition was Angelina's. He was there at a friend's insistence, someone who encouraged him to get out more and explore new experiences. The moment he entered the gallery, Jonathan felt slightly out of place. The white walls of the room were adorned with powerful photos of unknown people, each one expressing a unique mix of pain and resilience. He approached one of the images, studying the details of the portrait closely. Then, as he glanced across the room, he saw her. Angelina was a few feet away, engaged in conversation with a small group. She looked different, more confident, more at peace with herself, as though something within her had changed profoundly. Jonathan found himself watching her in silence, unsure of how to react. Part of him wanted to approach her, but another part feared what that encounter might bring to the surface. Angelina noticed Jonathan before he could look away. The surprise was mutual, but she maintained her composure. She took a deep breath and gave a subtle smile, a discreet gesture that he returned with a nod. When the group around her dispersed, Jonathan gathered his courage and walked over. For a moment, time seemed to slow down as they looked at each other, trying to decipher each other's feelings. "I didn't know this exhibition was yours," Jonathan said, breaking the initial silence. There was admiration in his voice, and he looked around, taking in every detail. "The photos are impressive. You've really captured people's emotions." Angelina smiled softly. "Thank you, Jonathan. This project has been a transformative experience. It's been a way for me to reconnect with so many things, including myself." The tension between them seemed to lessen as the conversation flowed. He kept glancing at the photographs, and as they discussed Angelina's creative process, he realized how much she had grown. There was a spark in her eyes he hadn't seen in a long time, an intensity that showed just how at peace she was with her journey. Angelina, in turn, noticed that Jonathan seemed more relaxed, less consumed by the urgency that used to drive him. At one point, as they talked, Jonathan mentioned how the exhibit touched people, making them reflect on their own experiences. He admitted that, in recent months, he too had confronted his own scars, something he had resisted doing before. Angelina listened attentively, absorbing every word. She realized it was the first time he was openly discussing his own emotional challenges. As the night went on, their conversation grew more intimate. They reminisced about moments from the past with a gentle nostalgia, without the weight of old hurts, as if they were finally ready to appreciate the good in everything they had once shared. Angelina felt tempted to ask how he was handling life after the breakup, but she decided to wait for him to bring it up. "These months have been hard," Jonathan confessed after a brief pause. "I realized that work isn't the only thing that defines who I am. I feel like, in some way, I was using it as an excuse to avoid dealing with what bothered me." Angelina nodded, fully understanding what he meant. "I think we all have our defense mechanisms. But eventually, we have to confront ourselves, or we'll never truly be free," she said, with a calmness that surprised both of them. The honesty of their conversation brought them closer in a way neither had expected. They were there, in the same space, without the armor they had worn for so long to hide their insecurities. Angelina felt a mix of relief and renewed hope, realizing that Jonathan had also allowed himself to grow and change. At one point, Jonathan's friend came over to remind him it was getting late. Jonathan hesitated, as if he wanted to prolong the reunion, but he knew it was time to go. He looked at Angelina, and for a brief second, the silence between them was filled with unspoken words, with a warmth that, despite everything, remained intact. "I'm glad I came," he said before leaving. "Seeing your work, and seeing you, it was truly inspiring." Angelina smiled, and with a small wave, watched him leave. She stayed in the gallery a few more minutes, feeling the weight of that encounter. Something within her had changed upon seeing him again, and though she didn't know exactly what the future held, she felt that a new door had opened. She realized that, even with all the pain of the past, there was something beautiful about finding someone who, despite time and change, still made her heart beat in a unique way. Perhaps it was only the beginning of a new chapter, or perhaps the end of a cycle that needed closure. After the reunion at the gallery, both Angelina and Jonathan were left with a sense of something unfinished, as if that brief encounter had opened a new perspective between them. A few days later, Angelina received a message from Jonathan inviting her for coffee. It was a simple invitation but laden with meaning. She accepted, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. At the coffee shop, the conversation started with trivial topics but quickly evolved into a deeper dialogue. They were more comfortable, as if the months apart had broken down the barriers built by past hurts. In a moment of sincerity, Angelina asked Jonathan what he really felt about his work and how it had affected their relationship. Jonathan sighed, pausing to think before responding. "I think for a long time, I hid behind my work. I always thought that building a solid career was the only way to ensure a stable future. But now I realize it made me miss important moments, and the worst part is that I didn't even notice how much it was affecting you," he admitted, his eyes filled with regret. Angelina nodded, touched by Jonathan's honesty. "I made mistakes too, Jonathan. I thought you would understand my needs without me having to say anything, as if it were your responsibility to notice my expectations. I see now that communication is key, but back then, we didn't know how to use it." They both fell silent for a few seconds, absorbing the weight of those confessions. It seemed that, finally, they were ready to open their hearts without fear of what they might find. Jonathan looked at her with an intensity Angelina knew well. It was the same look he had when they first met, filled with admiration and respect. "Angelina," he began, his voice full of emotion, "even after everything, I realize I never stopped loving you. But more than that, I understand that I need to be a better person to be by your side. Not just for you, but for myself too. These months have taught me so much about what really matters." Angelina smiled gently, placing her hand over Jonathan's on the table. "I never stopped loving you either. But if we ever decide to try again, I want it to be different. I want us to be partners, people who support each other while respecting each other's individuality." Jonathan agreed, and they spent the rest of the afternoon discussing their expectations, hopes, and even fears about the future. The conversation was liberating, as if each word released a bit of the pain that had accumulated in the past. As they left the coffee shop, they both felt renewed, ready to build something new, even if the process would be slow and require patience. In the days that followed, Angelina and Jonathan started meeting more frequently, always with the intention of keeping the dialogue open and honest. They respected each other's pace, without the pressure of resuming their relationship from where they had left off. Instead, they saw each meeting as a chance to rebuild their connection from scratch. Jonathan, on his part, began finding ways to balance work and personal life. He limited his overtime, learning to delegate tasks and to say no when necessary. He realized that being a good professional didn't mean sacrificing every other area of his life. With each change, he noticed the positive impact not only on his relationship with Angelina but also on his mental and emotional well-being. Angelina, on the other hand, continued to explore her passion for photography, but now with a tranquility she hadn't felt before. She no longer sought recognition or external validation. Her work was an expression of herself, a reflection of everything she had learned and overcome. She shared some of her new photos with Jonathan, and he, genuinely interested, offered his opinions, showing himself present and engaged in something that was important to her. One sunny afternoon, Angelina invited Jonathan to join her for a photo session in the park. She wanted to show him a little of her routine, of how she found beauty in details that might otherwise go unnoticed. They walked together, laughing and exchanging stories, while Angelina captured everyday scenes of strangers. Jonathan watched, fascinated by the dedication she put into each shot, as if each photo told a unique story. During a break, they sat on a bench under the shade of a tree. Jonathan looked at Angelina and, with a gentle smile, confessed, "I never realized how fascinating it is to see the world through your eyes. I don't think I ever really understood what your art meant to you." Angelina smiled, feeling that he was finally seeing her completely. "I'm glad you can see it now. This is my world, Jonathan, and I'm happy that, somehow, you're becoming part of it." Angelina and Jonathan sat on the same park bench where, months ago, they had begun reconnecting. Now, however, everything felt different. The lightness they both felt was the result of a journey of learning and forgiveness, a process that had brought them back to themselves and to the love they still held for each other. Jonathan looked at Angelina with a tender expression. "I've thought a lot about what we talked about over these past few months. And I think, for the first time, I truly understand what it means to build a future together without losing who we are." Angelina smiled, her eyes shining. "Yes, Jonathan. I also learned that a relationship needs more than love. It requires understanding, respect, and, above all, patience to handle each other's imperfections." The decision to start over came naturally, but this time there was no rush. They were aware of the difficulties and challenges, but they also trusted everything they had learned since the separation. This was a second chance, a new opportunity to build something stronger and more genuine. They committed to preserving each other's individuality without letting go of the love that united them. To symbolize this new beginning, they decided to take a trip together, a symbolic journey to a place where they could create new memories and reaffirm their commitment to this new phase. They chose a small coastal town, far from the urban bustle, where they could spend a few days enjoying simplicity and each other's company. During the trip, they walked along the beach hand in hand, with the sound of the waves crashing in the background as the sun set on the horizon. It was a perfect setting, but above all, it was the moment that mattered. Each step they took together was an affirmation that they were ready to move forward, with more maturity and a new understanding of love and life. Sitting on the sand, watching the sunset, Jonathan turned to Angelina and, in a soft voice, said, "Thank you for not giving up on us, even when things seemed impossible. I don't know what the future holds, but I want you to know that I'm here, ready to walk by your side." Angelina embraced him, feeling the peace she had long sought. "I'm ready too, Jonathan. And whatever the path, I know the most important thing is that we're together, supporting each other and respecting our individuality." Back in the city, Angelina and Jonathan continued to strengthen their relationship, maintaining the changes they had adopted. Jonathan kept balancing his work with his personal life, ensuring that time with Angelina was a priority. Angelina, in turn, continued to explore her artistic passions, with Jonathan by her side, always willing to offer support and encouragement. Gradually, the couple built a solid and truthful relationship where the past was no longer a shadow but rather a reminder of everything they had overcome. Their love was more mature, more resilient, as they both knew they weren't perfect but were committed to making it work. They had learned that love was, in large part, about accepting and respecting each other with all their strengths and vulnerabilities. Time passed, and on a sunny morning, Angelina walked through the park alone, mentally reliving their entire journey. She smiled, thinking about how fate had brought them to this point, like two souls who needed to lose themselves to find each other again. In the distance, she saw Jonathan approaching with a bouquet of flowers, a simple gesture that meant so much. He came closer, handed her the flowers, and hugged her, saying, "It still feels like a dream that we're here, Angelina. But I'm eternally grateful we got this second chance." Angelina looked into his eyes, feeling complete. "Yes, Jonathan. And now I know that every hardship prepared us to be here. None of it was in vain." As they walked together, hand in hand, the certainty that they were where they were meant to be solidified in their hearts. It didn't matter what lay ahead, for they were ready to face anything together, with a renewed commitment and an unbreakable mutual trust. And so, hand in hand, they continued down the path they had chosen to build, reminding themselves that true love isn't about never falling, but about finding the strength to rise and walk beside the one who makes the journey worthwhile. If this story touched you and showed you the power of a second chance, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to believe in love again. Subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories that will inspire you. Together, let's spread this message of hope and transformation.